Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be joining us. Welcome to our 2025 Global Privacy Benchmark Survey, a 360 view into key privacy developments. Some great information ahead. So today we're going to walk through very briefly the survey methodology, a little bit of understanding what this TrustStar Global Privacy Index is all about, and I think you'll find it very helpful. Some three major overarching things, but we'll dig deep into each one of these. Top five insights that we discovered in 2025. Some things are the same, some things are indeed different. Kind of what we've identified as the secret sauce to privacy program success. Some practical solutions. And with that, let's dive in. So, Gary, let's talk about who you reached out to and kind of those people in general.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. So a few key highlights here. One, it's a very robust sample. I'd like to make the claim that it's the largest, or certainly one of the largest surveys of this kind done globally and on an annual basis. We hit certain regions we're sampling from in particular. That's the US, Europe, UK. We also pick up some from Canada. And then because this survey is made available through your website, along with our targeted sampling, we pick up some folks from South America, Asia, and Africa too. What's really, I think, very powerful about the survey, Paul, is that we take a 360-degree view. And by that, I mean, again, I think it's the only survey of this kind that does that. We look at from just outside the privacy world, we look at, executive views, management views, like people management views, and individual contributors. So that's part of the 360. And then we look within the privacy function, both privacy executives and privacy team members. And with all of that together, we're able to put together using a fairly advanced weighting schema that allows us to compare year over year our results. I think a unique view into the world of privacy, and in particular privacy management, some of the challenges, opportunities that we face in the community every year. And what we do is we ask some questions year over year so that we have this consistency and we can see trends. And as you know, the world is constantly changing for good and for bad. And so in all that, we just want to make sure we also have a survey that is timely and speaks to the moment. And so every year we take off some questions that were relevant last year, but maybe not as relevant this year. And we use that space to add some new ones. So again, I'm excited to share with you some of the year over year results, and as well as some of the new discoveries that we made based on issues, in particular around artificial intelligence, that have come up this last year.
Very good. And a little bit about the Global Privacy Index that people may have not heard about it, but I'm sure they'll find it of value going forward.
Yeah, so what we do is from a larger number of survey items that we tested the first couple of years, we condensed it down to 12 key items that we call the keys and the outcomes to success in the world of privacy management. And what we do is we score that index such that these are all self-reported. If you're doing well at something or claim to be doing well at it, you get top scores. If you're doing just okay at it, you kind of get 0 points, but you can also lose points. So the scale ranges from theoretically -100 up to +100. The interesting thing is, even though this is self-reporting, you think, well, is there some sort of, reporting bias? Are we going to just see all positive results? You can see the distribution here. Many people, of course, being polled anonymously, confidentially, give us very candid responses. And you can see here that just over a third do claim that their companies are doing well. And we validate this against other measures within the survey, and you're going to see that. That makes a lot of sense to us, and I think it'll make sense to you. Just over a third, 37%, are doing okay. We give them a passing grade, but you can see a whole bunch of folks are saying no, they're really struggling. So in their companies. So what we're able to do again with this 360 weighted view of our sample is see not only the specific topics and issues that we're going to go through today, but what relationship those issues and topics have, like how much they matter in terms of one's company's overall privacy competence. And so that's really what the privacy index gets at, is what's the competence. And I'll let you comment, and then we'll go look at what some of these individual items are and then hit the results themselves.
That's excellent. And again, I think the important thing, right, is the year over year, right? To see as an industry how things are shifting, if they're shifting, right? Or,
Right.
there's a lot of noise in the world and in the environment right now, but is it really changing behavior, or are we kind of in a status quo, or a pause or whatever? And those types of things do certainly resonate and come up, obviously, using the Global Privacy Index created.
Absolutely.
So these 7 keys to privacy competency, walk me through these.
Sure. So the first is, and these are in no particular order, by the way, but is privacy a core part of your business strategy? Is it part of what you lay out in terms of your product, your service, the way you manage yourself internally, and of course, the way you manage and offer services, products up to the world? So it's got to be strategically integrated. That's one of the key. Are you mindful, such that everyone feels an obligation to contribute to this? This isn't just the private, it's important, as we'll see, to have a privacy team, but everyone feels ownership around this issue. That's we call mindfulness. The empowerment of people, which is, hey, no matter, this is where, we take a 360 view, but good companies who really want to take this seriously allow anyone to raise their hand. And if they see a privacy issue, it's not only that there won't be reprisal, but they have an obligation to raise their hand. And so that sort of employee empowerment becomes important. So that's I like to think of that as, from the bottom up, and then from the top down, Paul, you've got the board, you've got governance,
Yes.
people who are asking questions saying, well, how are we doing? And, tell us about your measurement. And what about these things we hear in the news? What's our liability, our risk, but also just what are we doing to make things right for our customers so that we continue to build brand trust? We're going to learn some more about that. Of course, all of this operationally, you can't just talk about, you got to do something about. So building training, building awareness that's one of the keys. And with all that, some companies do set themselves apart and they say, look, this isn't just something that we do, kind of like safety and privacy. And there's a bunch of things that you just have to integrate into your culture. And companies that do that also, some of them that are really successful and competent in the world of privacy, see it as a differentiator for them. So it helps to set their brand apart from others. And lastly, in terms of these keys, real integration into all elements of the business. Again, having a privacy team, we'll talk about this, whether it's centralized, a hybrid, or dispersed. Aside from that, just everyone being operationally mindful of the need to keep private matters private, if you will, becomes what we discovered was one of the keys to being a company in terms of managing privacy. So these are the 7 keys. And in addition to this, we have some outcomes that we measure we can look at momentarily.
Yeah, I wanted to just pause here because, those of us that have walked the walk and, have sat in whether it's a CPO chair as I have in the past, when I see these laid out, right? I remember back, 10 years ago, when just starting out building a program in a multinational company. A lot of these things were on paper, but it was almost premature. And let me pause there. And it was premature because it didn't set the cultural foundation at that moment in time, right? And you really need to spend time on embedding things of this sort as drivers in the cultural shift that needs to occur. And I've said this, and I'm sure people are tired of me saying this, but you're just not going to show up and instill a privacy team and think you somehow has instilled privacy into the DNA of the company. That just doesn't happen like that. You have to nurture it. You have to make people want to understand and the purpose behind it. I know I hear some of you already saying they don't care. This is, we're overhead. We don't generate money and blah, blah, blah. I hear that. But we also know that consumer behavior today, and Gary, you and I did a webinar about a month ago on consumers and some of their feedback, and that is they want to know that the company that they're buying from is indeed, I always say, respecting the handling of their personal data. no more, no less than you and I as consumers, because we're consumers at times, right? We would expect that of the companies we're doing business with. And so my point here is you have to have these as elements or aspiration points um, from the very beginning, because these will be waypoints, in my opinion, as you build your culture. Do you indeed have privacy mindfulness as you continue to work on the culture? And the culture, as we know, is not going to be something overnight, right? We know that it takes time to do this. We don't have a lot of time. I get that. And so we're going to have to need to, usher this in a little quicker. But it is important to people to understand, why am I doing this? Why are you asking me these questions, right? What is the end purpose in all this? And rarely do we come in and say that it is no different than you and I. We're respecting other people's information and how things are handled. And we're transparent about it. So things of that sort, I think, are really important. Those seven, sorry, I skipped ahead. Those seven key privacy competencies, um, to me, are again aspirational points you find in your culture. So let's talk about these five outcomes that matter a little bit, Gary.
Sure. So the first one is just, all of that data that companies collect, it's secure, and there's confidence that both employees and customers, all of this is secure and being professionally managed in terms of privacy requirements. There's explicit consent to what the consumer has allowed and the employee has allowed, and an understanding that, as you just said, these matters will be respected. And then there's basically four stakeholders we ask about. Your customers, clients, right at top of mind, but also your employees. Let's not forget them.
Mm-hmm.
Partners and third parties, which is a huge issue, especially now with supply chain and the integrated world we live in, especially but not exclusively in the digital world. How's all that information maintained in a private sort of privacy by design sort of framework? And then the general public, what is the sentiment, if you will, that the general public has around how well a company is managing privacy as well? So these four stakeholder groups are key. And then overall, we want to know, is the data safe, secure, and being managed in a privacy appropriate manner?
Yeah, and again, the key thing, obviously, that continues to, and I know that we use this on a regular basis, but that first word after the bold print, confidence, right?
Right.
Confidence that the company, confidence in your customers, your partners, your employees, in to get to the level of confidence, that's the rub with culture, right? You have to ingrain that we are doing this together in the culture, right? The reason we're doing this is no different than if you were on the other side and you were the consumer. What would your expectations be of the company, right? And having confidence that in every step of the way we'll do the right thing or try to do the best that we can, given the circumstances we face today, where there's just so many different regulations and trying to maintain it. But in the end, the question becomes, would you as a consumer expect this? If yes, then maybe that's the right thing to do for you as a business, right? And that's where I'm going with this is a lot of this stuff with the cultural aspect of it flourishes. Without it, I hate to say this sometimes, but it's as powerful as the paper it's on, right? There's not much there, right? And it's what the actions you take in making this reality. That's where kind of the tire hits the road, if you will. So let's move on to some overarching themes that were identified. These aren't the only ones, but certainly ones that appeared very vividly in the results.
Yes, so there's actually a lot in that survey, and we really encourage people at the end to download the entire white paper that's now available. But as we give you the highlights, one of them that really stood out is that companies take a principle-based approach. We're going to look at this in a little more detail to privacy regulations in general, and that's certainly better than just taking a very rigid view, and enormously better than not having or taking a view at all. And so being principle-based in terms of the approach to compliance and regulation is important. When we ask about different elements, what are the benefits? The interesting thing, and this has been consistent every single year we've done the survey, and we randomize the order that we give these. There's no bias involved, but the ability to build brand trust, especially with customers, clients, always comes out number one in terms of, what's the real benefit for all this work we do, Paul? What's the benefit? And the number one benefit is actually not really on the technical side, although you got to do the technical side and the legal side if you're going to actually manage this effectively, as you know, it's your whole world. But the real benefit is actually to everyone, which is, well, now even when we don't understand or know all that, as a customer, as an employee, et cetera, as we already discussed, we have confidence. And so brand trust really comes through as the number one benefit that's observed. And we're going to take a look at AI. It's, as it exponentially grows, and you can't tune into any webinar without hearing lots about this, but we have some specific data around its implications for privacy, both really just how it's, AI, if I could summarize AI, it's expanded the opportunity surface exponentially, and at the same time, it's expanded the threat surface at the same rate. And as in all human endeavors, next to this kind of revolutionary change we've seen, we've got to grow the good faster than the bad, and that's the world that privacy professionals live in as they navigate this world. What we're going to see is navigate it you must, because AI does offer all kinds of potential, and as you reap its benefits, you also have to put in place all the safeguards and reduce risk as well. So we're going to look at that.
All right, so we're going to get into what we consider the top 5 insights as we go forward. Just a reminder, folks, this presentation, the video as well as the actual presentation, will be available to you as being a participant here today. So if you're copiously jotting notes, continue to do that, but understand we will be providing you all of this information as well. So let's jump into number 1. Speaking of privacy, Gary, here we are.
Yeah, so we asked a question. We asked several questions. This one we thought was interesting because it's attitudinal in nature. It's it's asking people what's their impression around the sentiment towards managing AI and privacy challenges. You can see under a third, 28% are saying, or just over a quarter, I should say, 28% are saying they're ready and aligned. They feel like they've got this figured out. The teams and the folks internally, they're well coordinated. Just over a third are in the busy work of just making it happen, but they're not quite there yet. You can see combined, this gives us, if we do the quick math here, 2/3 of the companies are in these categories. So people are taking it seriously and they're tackling this, but you can see there are some folks, there's some laggards. 6% if you take those who are either risk averse and they're kind of not touching it, or there's widespread uncertainty. There's still some who fall into that, and another 10% with some growing concerns. So those percentages are obviously much smaller, but again, we have a very robust sample. If we take these combined, 26%, like a quarter of companies are struggling. And so let's not overly minimize the impact of that because there's so many companies out there that we as consumers do business with, or as business people we do business with, a quarter of them are struggling. And so we have to be cognizant of that. And it really comes home when we look at, it's basically a correlation or an association between, so based on your answer to that earlier attitudinal question, what if we just looked at your privacy index score? Again, going back to this competence. So it does 2 things here, Paul. One, it validates our measure, but more importantly, it tells us what the impact is on where you stand in terms of just generally your sentiment towards how well your company is managing it. The overall average that we found for the Global Privacy Index in 2025 was 61%. So if you're making steady progress on AI, you're kind of in that average group, and you're in the average in terms of privacy competence. If you're uh, ready and aligned and you're doing really well, it jumps and you surge way ahead. You're 16 points ahead here, as our headline shows. But then look at the conversely, those who are struggling, risk averse or widespread uncertainty, you're kind of measurably at the opposite end of that spectrum. You're falling well below the 61%, and you can see here you're giving yourself failing grades in terms of your privacy competence. So the relationship between your AI management and your privacy competence is clear. One last takeaway here, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, Paul, which is, again, I made the comment earlier. Here's where I would reinforce it, which is this AI isn't something you can ignore. And I'm just maybe perhaps stating the obvious, but what we've quantified here is some people are trying to ignore it or set it to the side, saying, oh, let's wait and figure it out. And if you're not able to competently use AI as it's relevant to your business, you might not be able to competently manage privacy either. So the competent folks out there who can manage privacy are also the competent folks who can manage AI, and we're seeing that strong correlation in this data.
I think that's a really kind of fascinating thing, that statement you just made, and I can see that, right? If you have sort of tackled or in the process of tackling how do you handle AI within your enterprise, you probably had to do some level of due diligence at this point, right? You probably had to look at, some of the different factors. What are some of the different models out there regarding the building of AI and the development and so forth. And okay, are we going to look at this as kind of purely from a controls based thinking, rules based thinking, or is it going to be more principles based, much more flexible in an approach? So, given that you probably had to do some of the sort, it makes sense that those that are in those top two buckets, perhaps, are indeed further along as a privacy program's maturity is, right? They're further along in that in those phases of maturity that we often see. So I can see the direct correlation. I do want to point out one thing with AI. You've heard me say this before, Gary, but to me, is what's driving, right, different behaviors and so forth. To me, with AI, the most important thing is communication. Too often I see organizations trying to do the right thing, but it was never socialized among the people that needed to be socialized with, right? Whether it's security, privacy, maybe some risk teams or whatever. And I think those are important takeaways. In fact, I would say if we want to dust off, if you will, the privacy by design principles that came about in 1995, it's hard to believe it's been that long. Um, but the privacy embedded in design is absolutely at play here. And we need to understand that privacy should be embedded in the design and architecture of the AI system or solution. And it becomes a part of the product, service, processes, and the core functionality. That's what privacy by design, one of the principles, is about. And it fits incredibly well here, where because we're in the unknown, we need to talk, right? And we can't have design and development teams over here doing things and the privacy team and the security team not knowing that. All together, we all need to be at the same table and having discussions about, the upside, tremendous upside AI offers, as well as some of the, as we know, exposure it has created for the cyber criminals of the world, and they're very sophisticated. No longer you think about some child in the basement of mom and dad's house, right, whacking away on a keyboard. We're talking about massive teams, small armies of hackers that are, doing these mass situations now, and they're getting very good because while we're talking about AI, they're also using AI in their various attempts to sabotage whatever it is they're trying to do or disrupt. So the old things of, misspellings or, some of the things that we would see in some of the, attacks before, and we knew that they were attacks. Those are pretty much hidden now because AI is cleaning up all that stuff and making it look absolutely genuine
Yeah.
for those that may be just looking at it with a naked eye. So, without that, let's go on, Gary, to our next insight, and that's getting into the winning blueprint.
Yeah. So we asked a question here. These are folks who have a privacy team. So first, I should start by saying just over, 90%, 91% of companies that we surveyed globally have a privacy team. Now our sample is mostly, but not exclusively of medium and large size enterprises. So we're looking at, larger businesses, but we also talked to some small businesses. And I just wanted to offer a little insight, a little footnote that we saw a big increase in terms of the percentage of smaller companies, those under 50 million, that also have privacy teams. Now, once you've got your privacy team, with that said, how do you organize? And you could do a centralized approach, you could use hub and spoke, and of course you could use decentralized. And we're asking a survey question here. Obviously, with any kind of organizational approach, it's about fit to purpose. And so it may vary by company, which makes most sense. But nonetheless, what you see here is just the privacy index scores. And so even though centralized with a single privacy office isn't taken by all companies, certainly those who are doing so inch ahead. I don't want to say surge ahead as we did before. The global average is 61. Those with the centralized approach sit marginally, but 5 points higher in terms of their privacy index score. Those with hub and spoke are decentralized, are sitting right. I'd say a 1% difference is, it might be statistically significant, but I don't know if it's substantively different. They're sitting close to the average. And then we saw that earlier in terms of your approach to regulation. If you take a principles-based approach, and you really focus on what's behind the legislation and how your company is going to approach that, you score much better in terms of your privacy competence. You're up there at 73%. If you take a hybrid approach to regulatory matters, you sit just again marginally above the average. Take just a rules-based regular approach, you're lagging at 56%. But I mentioned this earlier. Now we've quantified it. What if you have no privacy strategy at all? Failing miserably. So if your company doesn't take any sort of approach to privacy in terms of a strategy, maybe you've got cookie consent or something, but that's not part of a strategy. Just kind of like somebody's threw a few things on a checklist. Then self-reportedly, when we look at our privacy index scores, those companies do miserably, 13%. Again, our average was 61%, but 13% by any measure is a dismal score. And so we see, as I mentioned earlier, that a principles-based approach is best to how you tackle privacy. And I think you made that point as well, Paul.
Yes, I think it's got 2 points for me here is, obviously the org approach. One of the things I always want to stress is your organization structure may change over maturity, right? when I started out at Kellogg, everything was very right. The focus initially was to centralize things, even though the company's in 160 odd countries, right? And there were regional jurisdictions and in different teams and so forth, and they had legal and so forth. It was important from the beginning to have it centralized, right? It's like the old days, right? When we don't understand something, what do? We bring the brain trust together, right? We bring people together, start sharing, right? And then from there, things can tend to morph as people become comfortable with that. So I can see, while I certainly benefit from a centralized organization, over time, I had to go to more of a hub and spoke approach. So um, no one is right and wrong. We certainly see some corollaries, which you've explained and will continue to explain. Organization structure, early on, to me, central is the best approach. As far as how do we approach regulations, I too see more and more people beginning to focus more on the principles, um, and as opposed to the hardcore controls, right? That we would often see if we're dealing with the IT team, right? And
Right.
nothing against them. That's how they measure, and that's great. But it's a little bit different than perhaps privacy needs a measure. We need to be much more flexible. We don't have a lot of things that are absolutely precise every step of the way in the privacy world, right? There's a lot more gray involved, right? It's not that this is running or not running. It's running to an extent, right? I mean, there's got to be much more fluidity there.
Yeah.
So
Oh, oh,
go ahead, Gary.
oh, I'm sorry. No, I was just going to say, the nuance behind this is it's not we're taking opinion that, oh, you should be centralized, but my hunch would be, informed by the data, would be that, look, at a time when there's a lot of change and AI has introduced a lot of change, it's easier to manage change when you've got one
Yes,
that terrible expression, one throat to choke. Your executive, you're like,
you're
what's our
right.
team doing about this? It's great to have one team, and then there's a leader of that team, and they have a plan and they have a strategy, and then they can, disseminate that out. Now, as things mature, it might make a lot more sense to decentralize, to have the hub and spoke approach that
Yes.
you described, or
Right.
maybe fully decentralized. So again, it's fit to purpose. Our design
Yeah.
is always fit to purpose. My suspicion is what's behind these numbers is that we're in a time of a lot of change, and in such times, it makes sense to have a centralized team to manage it. That might be what's
Absolutely.
behind that slightly higher privacy index score for the centralized teams.
Yeah, you need to show. Remember, we go back to the five outcomes. You need
Right,
to show confidence. I think if I
right.
could, for the moment in time, there's a control factor of controlling the message that gets out, right? And you need to have that, right? But over time, you can loosen that up as you create other evangelists on your behalf, because you can't, as a CPO, you can't think you can do it all from the center. You're going to have a vast array of evangelist partners or whatever. If you're not sitting at that boardroom table, who is sitting there and able to evangelize or represent, the privacy function and in what it's dealing with at that moment in time? So there has to be early on some centricity, and then um, I think you could start kind of refining that into being, okay, strategic imperatives come from the center, but how we do these things may be different at the local jurisdiction. So let's go on to part two of number one, um, and that is KPIs and
Yeah,
solutions.
so you gotta, what's the old mantra now? You can't measure, you can't manage it. You gotta measure what you're gonna manage, put it in the negative or the positive. That means the same thing. And certainly what we're seeing here is that many, many companies you have a privacy team, you're going to put some KPIs, you're going to put some measurement in behind their efforts, OKRs. You're going to be looking at what are you doing and show me what you're getting done. And so the most common methods, and you can see there's quite an array here. There's not just one. There's probably more, but these were the specific ones we asked about. But you've completed internal assessments, which is you got stuff done on privacy. You've looked at a number of privacy-related customer inquiries, privacy impact assessments, the PIAs, et cetera. So you can see down the list here, many companies are tackling this in different ways. Those who measure, almost nobody's saying none of the above. You're going to measure it. You're going to put a KPI in to manage it, and then so the measurement becomes really key. And again, we saw that those who don't measure fall right off the map and they don't do well at privacy at all. And those who do measure, and it wasn't a particularly strong view in terms of the correlation between what you measured and your privacy competence, just that you had one or several measures in place. And some did a little better than others, but generally you just had to be tackling and saying, I'm making note of our progress here as we tackle this as a serious management issue. And then in addition to that, the solutions used in terms of software, we can see that about 1 in 5 are claiming that they use a fit to privacy purpose solution. So they're buying a commercial solution, privacy management software to be able to manage. Even more, slightly higher percentage, you can see a quarter of companies are using GRC software. So that obviously has some purpose that gets at privacy, but it does other things as well. So we can talk about that, Paul, in terms of what's the trade-off there. Still a lot of folks doing internally developed systems. They're using free or open source privacy. And there's still a lot of, privacy spreadsheet Olympics out there. Just like, what if we all just, loaded this up on Google Docs or send out Excel sheets or what have you, had people fill things out? There's still quite a few companies tackling it in that way too. So, generally I would see that as a less mature. I'm not here to make a pitch for what you buy, but looking at these numbers, there's still quite a variety in terms of approaches to this. And generally, I would just say this about any important issue within, especially medium to large size companies, they tend to lean towards, when they become competent at things, to having solutions that are fit again to that purpose.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And very much aligned on measuring something, right? And obviously your measurement will change as the maturity of your program changes, or it should. At the beginning, right, it may be like it shows down here, how many DSARs did we fulfill, right, process and so forth, and some of those ongoing day-to-day privacy actions, functions that all of us know very well. But as you go on, right, now you're going to start hopefully starting to dig a little bit deeper and in understanding a little bit about maybe at the job or the role level, right? You want to start getting into KPIs that are dealing with a specific role, right? We're not going to do that at first. We're going to move into that once we've bedded down and have success in the other things. So I think, a lot of this continues to be, right? These are excellent things. It's putting on the map of things you should be doing, right? But understand there's no one specific way to do it. They're going to be different based on your maturity as a program, right? Another way to put it is, look, if your people are not privacy savvy, right, you can talk to them all day long about some stuff regarding purpose and intent. But if they're not connecting to it, right, and you're trying to change culture and people's behaviors, it's like dealing with a child, right? It's very difficult to get them to move in that direction unless they understand some context, and it's the betterment of all of us and helps the company, right, and reputation wise and so forth. As far as the solutions, The only thing I keep saying about, spreadsheets and things like that is the long-term sustainability. It's great when we once had the mentality of we just need to check the box on that list, right? We need to get this
Right.
done, right? Hear that all the time regarding data inventories. They just need to get this done. And my response is that they don't want to hear is this is really never done. This is a living document that should always be changing, right? And so it's not like a checklist. It's a living document. How do you embed it into your business, therefore your culture, and sustaining this going forward? With this spreadsheets, it's very difficult to do that. It's in a spreadsheet. Most people know how to use spreadsheets, but I would suggest, as far as long term, year over the year, looking at things, right? Am I making progress, whatever? Very difficult to try to ascertain it through, as you say, the spreadsheet Olympics. So let's move on to number three.
Well, I mentioned this earlier, so we can be brief on this one, but we are seeing year over year that, especially if you look to the far left, large companies, over 90%, 92%, 93% have a privacy team. What we see over on the far right, so these percentages go down just very nominally. Let's see, just under around 89% of the 51 to 500 million, in that medium-sized category. But what we saw a big surge in this last year was those who are smaller companies. Now, some of that variation might be the fact that our main focus is the medium and large, but nonetheless, we saw a big uptake. We've now got 87% of the smaller companies who are claiming that they've got a privacy team or a privacy office of some kind. It might be one person or it might be several, but they've got a dedicated privacy office that is managing it.
Yeah, so we're really looking at this area here. Is some significant change in behavior. Absolutely. One of the things, we're in a period of uncertainty. We all know that. Every company we talk to is in there. It's not just a privacy thing, it's a business thing, right? And CFOs do what CFOs do, right? And that is they hold back money during times of uncertainty, right? Um, so we're hoping, once we get past this period of uncertainty, that we'll see purse strings loosen up a little bit. We know that there's a lot of, again, holding back. Do what you can with what you already have or what we already have in stock. But in time, if you're selecting software, make sure that you're picking the software that aligns with, lack of better terms, again, that privacy aptitude, right? And it should be simple to configure and use and get you the information and save you time along the way as it creates those efficiencies. So with that, Gary, let's jump to this number four. And
Yeah.
let me get rid of the this.
Get rid of your circle there.
Yeah,
And
get
follow
rid of
this.
that. And I'm going to get rid of that completely. There we go.
We want to know, looking at the commercial side of the software, what is it that you're likely to purchase or that you've already purchased? And we see here that the percentages are fairly high here in terms of what we're showing. The likelihood to purchase is particularly strong, as you can see here, across all kinds of measures, but still the website tracking this last year, this notion of an overall data privacy management software, have one place where you can go to get truth on privacy seems to be of great interest in the market. Similar to what, or a good example of which I should say, is TrustArc's Trust Center. So the ability to manage all the complexity is what we've seen. We're not showing it here, but when I looked at this in terms of privacy competence, it seemed what was really clear is there's a correlation just between how many things that you're tackling from a management standpoint, very much related to your privacy competence, that you had to be doing at least 3 or 4 of these to hit the average. And up to 9 different things you might be doing, those who are doing 8 or 9 were off the charts. They're up in the 80-90% in terms of privacy competence, I think 88%. So all of them are important. Some may be you put as more or versus less important, but we're seeing that in terms of the likelihood to purchase.
Yeah, to me there were these were not surprises, particularly over the last year. When we see a lot of concern growing, mainly due to AI, but even before AI, there was some strong consumer sentiment backlash, whatever you want to call it, about respecting or trusting companies to do the right thing with their personal data. So being able to kind of, if you will, showcase those activities, right, through whether policies or ability to ask questions or whatever it may be, uh, the trust centers, right, became very, very important, particularly for B2B B2C companies in particular. B2B, there's some value in it as well because the ability to share policies between a customer and another customer, or customer and the manufacturer, or whoever the one is providing the service type of thing. So it is no surprise to me that there needs to be trust centers, and then particularly in B2B, right, looking at those individual vendors that are doing some level of work, whether it's touching personal data or not. So both of these become critical given their focal points. Um,
Absolutely.
with
Well,
that,
so I should have just mentioned, it wasn't clear at the beginning. These are the privacy index scores. So the companies that have already bought them are showing the privacy competence. The ones that are highly likely to buy them, we're showing those. And again, what we didn't show is those who weren't. Their scores tend to be dismally low. Again, it's an indicator that a company isn't taking it seriously, if you will, if they don't have a solution in place to manage it.
okay, very good. And number 5.
Yeah. Well, we've got lots of different things we asked in terms of the privacy initiatives. Similar to before, talking about things you can buy, if you will, to manage this, but just like, do you have a breach notification process? What we're seeing is many companies are hitting, at least by many, I mean 2/3 or so, if you look to those who have fully implemented solutions around this, all the way through to having kind of other certifications, down to what we already mentioned, maintaining or building a trust center, having third-party certifications, etc. So different levels of implementation. Small percentage haven't done anything at all, but still a concerning amount who've sort of put it on their list but not completed the task, if you will. So seeing a nice distribution here. Breach notification process seems to be the one that at least has the highest percentage of companies that have fully implemented a solution in order to manage that. I imagine for some of these, it's hard to put in half a solution if you actually want to do it, and so that might be why something like privacy processes throughout our supply chain, you might have tackled some, but not all of your supply chain. So a partial kind of makes more sense intuitively to me there. But you can see here, many companies taking it seriously, implementing fully a solution. And again, I mentioned earlier on the what have you purchased, but here it's what have you done. Those who have implemented across the board score really, really high in terms of privacy competence.
Yeah, no, some great information here. And again, folks, you will get this entire presentation. So you'll be able to dig in and, of course, access the full report where these excerpts were pulled from so that you can read some of the detail behind this that we have bubbled up for you. In the interest of time, let's move on. One of the things that became clear as we've gone through this, Gary, is there seems to be some emergence of some what I'll call for this purpose as a secret sauce, the ingredients for success, if you will. And as we look at that, right, the first aspect is, as we talked about, is centralizing teams, at least initially, right? And these are kind of the key ingredients. So centralized teams is one. Another key ingredient is to measure outcomes. So again, KPIs and doing some level of measurement. The next one, of course, is embracing frameworks, right? Those principles, gap principles, you name it, those are the things that we're kind of talking about where they're much more, vague, if you will, which gives us much more flexibility. But in the end, they're very consumer centric, which is in all of this, right? When we boil down all these regulations, what are we trying to do? We're trying to impact those that are providing us information about themselves. We're trying to show that we're responsible with their information, and hopefully provide them a value benefit back as part of that. And then the last one of the secret ingredients is, as you just stated, the purpose built tools, focusing in on specific areas that need to be reviewed. It could be a whole platform or it could be pieces, right,
Right.
that are important in this situation. Gary, I have a couple of questions that have come in. One is, how can a privacy team feel prepared for AI if other departments are not? I'm confused by that since it is usually privacy reviewing vendor or sub-processor AI use, which would impact other parts of the business. It's a great question. And your initial thoughts on that?
Well, again, our results showed that if your company was already tackling AI in a substantial way, then your privacy team also doing so, uh, then you have high competence. And so it doesn't surprise me that, it's like people performance, company performance. If you're competent generally at tackling things, AI has been one of those things you're on top of, and then your privacy team is also on top of it. I think to answer your question, what's perhaps it's not confusing, only in the sense that you can't get too far ahead of your company. You can't be great in your privacy team on AI if your company
Yeah.
isn't doing it. Because, I mean, you can do your job very competently, don't get me wrong, but you're going to be pointing out the holes, the gaps, the things that need to be tackled. So you can certainly get ahead, and it would be a confusing environment to be in where the privacy team was way ahead of the AI team. But one last finding for you is a lot of companies have their AI, cybersecurity, and their privacy pretty closely integrated. Again, as not necessarily as one, but these centers of competence, if you will. And so it's very difficult for a company to be highly competent at one, not competent at the other,
Yeah.
and to advance well as a company, to perform
Yeah,
well overall.
yeah, and I agree with you. I think it sounds like these kind of grew up in silos, right? And my recommendation is it can't grow up in silos, right?
Right.
That's the whole push I made for privacy by design. Everyone has to be engaged in it. And that would be my recommendation is try to get a part of that broader team that is making AI decisions because you need to be involved in those early stages. Otherwise, you're going to be the organization that says no, and no one wants to have to live through that. Actually, there's another one that just popped in. For Insight 4, does TrustTalk offer any certifications for mastery of their platform? I guess I can explain that. There are no specific certifications for mastering our platform. So, yeah, there's some other providers out there that You go through some sort of training and you get a seal or sticker or whatever it is, shingle, that you master platform. We do not have that. It's something that we've discussed many times. We have not officially launched that as of yet. We do have solutions, obviously, to address a number of these things that were discovered through the survey. These are all purpose-built type of tools. You see the Trust Center there on the far right-hand side. A thank you to everyone for joining us. Thank you for your time. We know it's very valuable, and we appreciate you joining us on this benchmark review. We hope you found it of value. And Gary, as always, pleasure is all mine to work with you, doing great stuff, great information, not only for Trust Talk, but great information for our industry. And we thank you for all your time on that.
Oh,
Um,
you're very welcome, Paul. And thank you. One last plug. If you people go on your website, top of the carousel is the actual very engaging interactive report where you can see more of the data. And then as you scroll down and interact, you can actually fill out your information and get a complete end-to-end copy of the white paper, the survey results. So for
Excellent.
anyone in the audience who wants to learn more, it's right there on the website. And Paul, the pleasure is actually mine, and I really appreciate being able to work with you all, and you in particular, and the team at TrustArc. It's always just an absolute pleasure, and I'm very excited. We've got our next year's results out. Now let's start thinking about next year.
All right. Very good. Again, folks, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Look for our next webinar.